Gentlemen, it's been fantastic to watch this backwards and forwards of emails. This little video, it just flows on from a conversation that I had with Norris last week, where we talked about issues that we've all been discussing in terms of our constant dismay at the levels or lack of levels of educator training, not just in entrepreneurship education, obviously, but in education in general. And how when we try to push the limits and try to do something special that requires us to become better educators to help our students, we can easily fall foul of institutional and professional association pressures. And, I'm sure I'm going to annoy some of you in this video. And I'm not doing it deliberately, but at the same time, I'm not interested in having a process that we start to think about doing where we've all got to sort of turn a blind eye to the things that we are passionate about, just simply so we can have an association. I think there is great opportunity for us to have something that we do together that's meaningful and has a massive impact on our field. But I don't see that happening while we all hang on to our own little vested interests. I think the vested interests have to be parked below something that's done for a global reason rather than a local reason. It'll have a local benefit if we do it right at the global, but if we have our local interests permeating through what we're trying to do here, it won't have the global impact. And I'm only thinking about something here in this video that has the ability to reach every corner of every classroom right across the world. Because that's most probably the passion that I have, is entrepreneurship education as something that's possible for everyone to engage in an effective and meaningful way. So this video is about taking control. And don't worry if you're offended by something I say, then just in your email back to say, hey, and I'm offended by that too. That's not a problem. I'm not doing it to offend you, but if we were going to work together, it'd be good to get those sorts of things on the table. So let's look at what it actually is that Norris and I talked about last week. We talked about this notion of a professional process of personal development and accreditation that would be specific for entrepreneurship education, as that pertains to startup focus right through to the learner themselves understanding their entrepreneurial self. Okay, so it's from education through to training, right? It would have a global focus, so it's an online process that anyone anywhere in the world with access to simple online process could actually engage with. It's independent of all other agendas. So this is not something for ISBE, that's not something for CANs, it's not something for USB. They may become points of distribution, they may become champions of what's developed, but those types of associations already have their own reason for being, and you could argue that their history over the last 20 years is what's precluded these types of associations from being around in the first place. It doesn't matter that we've got someone like Doan who's really innovative and trying to do things inside that. The reality is we can't guarantee that a Doan or anyone else will be in that association in 3 or 4 years' time. And it's important that what we could set up actually has its own independence and will outlive any changing strategic direction that any other organisation at a national level may take. It's important that it's targeted at every level of education, from a kindergarten teacher right through to higher education and beyond, other things that are happening in our community. And it's important that it's produced by recognised experts. Now, we can obviously debate what is a recognised expert, but I think we can set a fairly high benchmark for what we would deem to be a recognised expert that I suspect we all meet, but at the same time, personally, I would not like to see 50 people involved in trying to set this up. I think that kills it before it even starts. So there's a very small amount of people that we need to pull into this space. We can certainly have advisory groups that help us to understand other aspects of what we're trying to do in different ways. So it's not just a small group of people that decide they understand the world, but it's a small group of people who make a decision that they can work with each other for a common goal, who then can draw upon other people. So just because we know somebody who knows something doesn't mean that they should get a seat at the table. What it means is we should be able to recognise those people in an advisory capacity to help us understand what we're doing. So that's the essence of what we're doing. What I shared with Norris was the stuff that HEA has been doing. For those of you familiar, they've got about 93,000 accredited fellows around the world and growing rapidly. And it's something that's a great model for us, I think, to look at. It's gone from being a UK-centric body. Andy's very involved with them at the moment, so he'll be able to talk to us more about this. But you look at the reach that they're getting, and I think it's because of the vacuum, the void that exists around accreditation, globally around education. And I think there's a lot of things in their model that we can really start to look at. So we can be, and if you're not aware of them, I'll just very quickly tell you, they have a professional services framework, and it focuses on areas of activities, it focuses on your core knowledge, focuses on your core values. That sort of looks, most of you can't read it so well on the screen here, but it's, the things that you know about and can do. It's your ability to actually go and do them, and it's your ability to and demonstrated respect for the learner as individuals through that process. That's a very crude way of working through the dimensions of this framework. They offer 4 different pathways for accreditation. The first one is an associate fellow. It's not a difficult bar. It's really about getting people to start a process of reflection. Then there's some sort of demonstrated ability to have actually applied this in your learning spaces, and that's where you become a fellow. And then beyond that, I'm currently a senior fellow, so I understand very clearly what's required. And at this level, it's about demonstrating mentorship. So it's not how great you are in the classroom, right? Being a fellow, that's where we're demonstrating how great we are in the classroom. But being a fellow, it's demonstrating how we contribute to our colleagues, and whether we're managing and organising programs, but it's our ability to actually pass on and support other people in their journey as well. I'm currently in the process, so I'm hopefully we'll be successful in getting Principal Fellow. This is not an easy thing to get. It's not a continuation of a process. It is difficult. I think my university's decided to back me for it. This is a quite expensive process of accreditation. To give an example, at QUT, where I am, there are 350 fellows of HEA. I think there are 12 principal fellows. So my university's decided that they believe that I'm capable of getting this, so they'll support me. It's quite a lot of money to go through that process and other such things. And this is purely about leadership. It's just about your leadership, educational leadership. So it doesn't matter how great you are in the classroom. If you haven't demonstrated leadership in your institution, in your nation, globally, then you wouldn't be able to apply for that. Now, that's 4 levels. And we don't need to adopt what someone else has done. But from my mind, I just wanted to leave this with you to sort of connect back to the nature of the thinking that Norris and I had. And this sort of reflects some of the conversations that Doan has created on Facebook, which we've all started to sort of feed into in that regard. There's a knowledge gap, right? We're not even sure that everyone actually understands how humans learn. And I suspect we all don't know everything we need to know, so there's something there that we can learn more about. We're supposed to be in the business of transformational learning. I wonder to what extent do all the educators in this space actually even understand what transformational learning is. Do they understand the difference between education and training? It was quite funny. I'll just give you if you're only going to get one laugh out of this video, you might get one here. I had this on in a presentation at a conference I did recently, and I had the words education at one end and training at the other. And I asked the audience, are they in the education and training game? Yeah, that's what we do. Okay, fine. Do you see a very specific difference between these things? No, everyone sort of thought education and training quite related, sort of pretty much the same sort of thing quite often. And then I put one word in front of both of these words, and it changed their opinion. And that was the word sex. So I said, imagine your daughter goes to school and in the morning they give her sex education, and after lunch she goes off to do her sex training. Two very, very different things. And we need to be able to educate not only ourselves, but the people that we might want to be able to work with, and the general public, for that matter, that there's a massive difference between education and training. And a lot of what's happening in our space at the moment is not much more than training. That doesn't mean that training's a bad thing, but we do need to understand the limitations of training and the way that it interacts with and blends with education, and the limits of education. I'm reminded when of a moment that Andy and I had in Geneva at the United Nations, when a colleague who's most probably known to most of us stood up and claimed that he had actually coined the phrases learning about, for and through. And Andy and I sat there with a fairly cringe look on our faces thinking, bloody hell, how can that be so, you know, given that we sort of knew its origins. This is the sort of stuff, and we see it more and more in the literature. People basically rewriting history, coming up with a logical idea, but it's an idea that's already been in the literature for 5 or 10 or 15 or 30 or 100 years, and passing it off as their own. So there's some challenges for us in this space. We need basic knowledge so that we actually understand the nature of how we're applying certain principles. I think Martin and others have sort of been honing in of recent times on this notion of assessment, and there's clearly challenges for us there, but they're not challenges for us if we were to work together, and we can actually create, these are the principles, right? What is the role of the student, the educator, and institution? The work we've been doing recently on pedagogy, andragogy, and hudagogy shows no sign of stopping. In fact, it's already the genie's already out of the body. I met the president of a college here in Australia recently, who have taken the work that Andy and I have done with CAF, and that they've reorganised their entire college. The entire college organised on that one paper. It's so obvious that the educator cannot 100% pedagogically control the outcomes for the student. We have to have better ways and better principles. Now, I'm not suggesting this is the principle, right? I'm just putting it there as an example, really. I suspect there's many other principles that we need people to understand. From being able to develop those knowledges and principles, we need people to be able to demonstrate how that knowledge and principles is put into action. What are the entrepreneurial ecosystems? How do they connect to and create them, the educators that is, for the students' benefit? And lastly, which is really most probably the area where I have the greatest passion, is this notion of scholarship. So not just standing up on our apple boxes and yelling as loud as anyone can hear us, this is the way to do it, but developing our own personal reflections and understanding our own personal contribution. What is it about us that holds us back? What is it about us that helps us to move things forward? And what leadership can we provide in this area, and how do we give back to our own field? So when Norris and I were just having a general chat, not saying this is locked in any sense, but we were thinking this is what's sort of missing. So basic knowledge relates to principles, how people can demonstrate that in practice, and that overarching scholarship of teaching and learning, which is missing from our field. So you could imagine it looking something a little bit like this. We've got people out there who are interacting with us by completing online modules regarding the basic knowledge and principles of education and entrepreneurship education. And that could be quite interactive as well, because it could be supported with online conversations and other such things. From that, they could become a fellow of whatever actually is we call ourselves, if we were to do something. Having achieved fellow status, they could then go off and they could apply this basic knowledge and principles of education and entrepreneurship education. And they could then provide us over time with an illustration of the context specific to their expertise. We're not looking for best practice to be shouted from the rooftops here. There are many, many weird and wonderful contexts that relate to the provision of entrepreneurship education. And we need to be able to embrace all of those contexts and not try to ask people to do something that they'll never be capable of. Now, I've just put a name on here of mentor status. Now, it can be anything, but I've got to put 3 labels on this to show progression. So, we could go from being a fellow to a mentor, an accredited mentor. Then, to the extent that we could have this demonstrated leadership in the fields of entrepreneurship education now. You see, that's first now, because we're now providing that leadership in our own field and education more broadly. We can be a recognised leader, so an accredited leader in this space. Now, if you look at the HEA model, the way that works is to say, if you look at what happened at QUT and what I was also involved with at the University of Tasmania, is the caravan rolls into town. Here's a model for you to use. To use it, you need to create find your best educators and accredit them. Get them through this process, work with us, and once they become principal fellows, then they can actually guide the process themselves. So all I'm really suggesting here is that we work through and try to make sense of what would we think is great for the field. Who can we identify within ourselves and other people that we believe would be already meeting that descriptor of a leader? We become the creators of this process. We use our various expertise. We create something that the sum of the parts is far, far greater than what we could ever do as individuals. But as I said to Norris the other day, the key thing here is to actually design this so that it is self-sustaining. So I'll leave you with this to think about in terms of an example. Let's say that a number of us created this. And let's say that we knew that we had collectively 200 people we know collectively who could meet the requirements of mentor, right? So we create an opportunity for them to come in, let's call it a ground level for that thing, and to be able to provide that. And maybe they don't have to pay anything for it. Maybe they just simply get this, right? Because of their recognised performance and contribution on X, Y, and Z. We then have a panel of over 200 expert reviewers who can be working with us to help assess the next lot of mentors. So if we had 2,000 applicants, for argument's sake, globally that came in, that would be across the year 10 applications that would be being assessed. So, and then once you've got that, again, you've got this process just cascading underneath you, but you've always got enough people to actually do the work that sits underneath it. So, I'm not saying anything's this perfect. It's a straight little walk in the park. It's all easy to do. But there is something that we could do. We need to work out. Let's get online if we want to think about this. I don't think it would be very clever of us to have 1 million emails go backwards and forwards about this video, right? I don't expect everyone's going to say, that's fantastic, let's just go and do it. But I don't think 1 million emails going backwards and forwards is actually going to help us. If we want to do something in this space, and you think this is somewhere over in that right corner, doesn't have to be that it's right in any sense, but it's something that you want to be a part of, well, let us know. And let's get online. Let's have a conversation. The technology just is a drop of a button. Let's make that happen. I use Zoom. I'm not sure if you guys use Zoom. That's much better than Skype in terms of group calls and things like that. But we can make that happen. We can have a conversation. We can work through it. I've thought about 2 different things in regard to this. I thought to myself, is this something that we want to leverage through our own institutions and take their credibility and use that? Or do we want to simply be individuals who create something, a global entity that's online, that doesn't have fixed costs? Like, it's got to be entrepreneurs in this, guys. I mean, this is just 101. I mean, we're not having secretaries being paid for, and we need to design this from the very ground up as being something that can take care of itself, and it's our time and effort that's the contribution we're making to it. That doesn't mean that we can't design it so that we don't make money out of it. I don't see any problem with that at all, but those are the sorts of conversations that we obviously need to be having. I tend to be in the favour of us doing it by ourselves. I think if we find 10, 15 of us and we think, wow, this is a pretty cool group of people and we'd all like to work with each other, the chances of getting that coordination across all of our institutions, I think, is nil. So it almost kills it before it starts. The chance of getting all our different organisations, be they CANs, ISPI, UASB, ICSB, it doesn't really matter, all of those different organisations, to want to play ball with us in the right way, I think, again, creates a huge shadow over what we're trying to do. I think we need freedom. I think we need to be able to act. I think collectively we are bigger than the biggest brands that are out there, right? There's always going to be, and we've seen it, part of the conversation that came out from Andy and other people on last Friday and on Saturday, that we've got this challenge that someone from a big ivory tower calls out something and says, this is the way it is, or this is how we can help you. And it's easy for everyone to say, wow, well, they said it. It must be right? I think we can gazump all of that stuff by simply having the right people in it at the beginning, and the recognition that we all have in our own little corners of the globe, I think will make this thing sing and dance. So I'll leave it back to you guys. Hopefully that's sort of what we talked about, Norris. Hopefully I haven't gone off on too much of a tangent here. But I think there's something that we could do that would be super cool, that would help our field much more than anything that we could do at the local level. And I think all we need to do is be prepared to be understanding and work through that process of accepting that we have many overlaps in our ideas and many disconnects between some of our thinking, and move past all of those sorts of things. No one has to own the first principle. No one has to be the king of anything, because we're still developing our knowledge around this space. We really are in our infancy. But I think it's the leaders, the people who are recognised leaders in this space, it's time for us to come together and start building a more coherent body of knowledge that we can actually start sharing with people who want to understand what it means to become accredited in a field of entrepreneurship education. Anyway, guys, I'll leave you with that, and let's see where we get to.